G'day, and welcome to the I Should Have Stayed in Bed podcast, episode 2.
I actually can't believe we've made it to 2 episodes.
We have, woohoo!
This week, we've actually got a 278 AFL game player, All-Australian player, 95-2000, a 95 Premiership player for Carlton, an AFL Life member. With us today, we have an absolute champion bloke and a good friend of the show, Anthony Koutoufides. All right, welcome, Anthony. It's really good to have you with us this morning. A great friend of ours, but also a superstar of AFL. And apparently, Nico, one of the most athletic players of all time. Is that true, Kouta?
Undoubtedly.
Well, that's stated, so I don't know if you're reading the notes, then I'll take it, Ray. But good to be on the show, boys. Thank you very much for.
Well, that's what it says on Wikipedia, Kouta. Everything on Wikipedia is true, isn't it? Or did you write it yourself?
No, I didn't write it myself, Ray. I wouldn't know how to do that. Okay, no, I'm sure you'd love to tell all the people that I did do it. So I guess I was known as the first athlete to come into the AFL, and that's probably one of the things that really got everyone talking and you know, everyone thinking. Well, the perception is that I started footy at the later stage of my life, which was so incorrect, which I'm sure we'll find out during this podcast. With all the things that I achieved in athletics in Carlton, you know, as a junior, like in my teens, trying to convince me to stop, you know, doing athletics and start playing footy full time. But that took me a long time to convince myself until, you know, they finally offered me a senior contract. So I had a great athletics career and also junior footy career also.
Well, speaking of junior footy, let's go back a little bit further and let's talk about your childhood. Where did you grow up and your background? I think there's probably a few misconceptions about your nationality. Let's talk about what your actual nationality is and yeah, what it was like growing up as a kid, where you grew up, and a bit about how you then got into footy.
Yeah, well, my dad was born in Egypt, but of Greek background. He was Cypriot Greek. And my mum was born in Italy, North Italy, near Venice. And so, yeah, somehow, you know, they came to Australia. My dad had to flee Egypt because I think if you were if you weren't Egyptian or whatever it was, then you had to leave the country. And so he did and came to Australia. My mum had lost both her parents and decided to come out and see her brother, who was living in Australia at that time, and with plans on going back. But, yeah, met my father and, you know, 3 kids later, there we were, the Kouta family. We grew up in the northern part of Melbourne in an area called Lalor Thomastown. We were sort of basically on the border. So we could claim, well, Lalor Thomastown didn't really matter. We went to a primary school because it was such a growth area in Melbourne. At that stage, there was an influx of a heap of, you know, Europeans, and then obviously they're having kids. They all moved out to the northern suburbs, moved away from the smaller houses of inner city, which I'm sure a lot of them would have regretted because the prices of inner city houses were skyrocketed compared to what they were in the outer suburbs. And I think back then it was the equivalent of prices too. So everyone went for the newer houses, a little bit more space or land and whatever it was. And yeah, the primary school we went to had over 1,000 kids. And so,
oh wow,
you know, be around, yeah, it was a huge primary school. And so my high school was the same, had over 1,000 kids. And so I was very lucky, boys, because where I grew, you know, in that area, there was so many like young kids around. And of course, Australia back then, we had such freedom and there was not a lot of trouble out there. And so, you know, the parents just sort of gave you that leeway to be able to just go out there and play on the streets, the parks, and do whatever, jump on your bikes and hang out with your mates. And that's what life was like. And I had so many great athletes around our area, and we just loved sport. And so every spare second, mum and dad didn't have too much money. We didn't go on holidays or anything. Any spare second, we were out on our bikes, you know, out in the parks, you know, playing sport, going yabbing and doing all these fun things as we did as young kids. And that's how we sort of grew up. So I always think how lucky I was to be surrounded by, you know, people that love their sports and that have really accomplished a lot.
Just mention that time. You touched on great athletes around your area. Who was around your area?
I mean, like we talk about athletes. I guess there was probably not many that sort of went on to AFL and maybe accomplished or have careers like what I had. But if we're talking about junior athletics, my brother was a state, you know, hurdles champion. I had a friend of mine that was half.
That Paul?
Yeah, my brother Paul. Yeah, so my brother Paul played under 19s at Carlton too for I think 2 years. But the poor bloke, he was born in December 71. I'm born in January 73. But it's like in footy, it's 2 years. So if he had another year of under 19s footy, I reckon he would have had a lot better chance of maybe possibly, you know, making the Carlton senior list. He played a reserve game and really dominated. So he was probably more renowned in the area as being, he was more that tougher, harder kind of footballer. I was more that, I guess, had that athleticism, so I was a little bit more freakish in what I was able to do. But Paul was, really renowned. So, and there was another guy who was half Papua New Guinean and half Croatian, Jerry Marnov, and, he was state sprints in 100, 200 metre champion, long jump. I mean, we went to the same primary school, and
Wow.
we played at, same clubs. And so we had, I just had incredible. And there was others too that played under 19s at Carlton too that I basically grew up with also. So I was very, very fortunate. So like at primary school, I get to the school, European parents, and there was a bit of soccer going around, but to us, the sport was footy, and at the age of 8, I pick up the footy and I fall in love with it, man. I'm starting to play this game, and our friends invited us down to a local footy club, and we went down there without telling mum and dad. And, we went home. Mum and dad didn't want us to play, but we said, no, we're going to play. And so we did. And so, in the first year, I had no idea what was going on. But by the second year, I started to dominate, and, the coach in the under 10s, he always says to me, Cootie, you're the only kid who actually kicked the footy and chased after it and actually marked it. So I probably kicked it maybe 20 metres or whatever, and I chased it and marked it again. So I think people could see early on I had a little bit of ability. And even when I was in grade 4, the grade 5 and 6 footballers, the two coaches went to my brother Paul, who was in grade 5 and I'm in grade 4, and they said, oh, can you ask your brother if he wants to play footy with us? And I remember my brother coming to me, I'm like, I'm not playing with you guys, man. Like, you're a lot older. And eventually the teachers were at him, and I went and played, in grade 4, and I was at full forward, and I'm kicking all these goals, against grade 5s and 6s and stuff like that. So it started really early on. Even, grade 5, I was a state high jump champion, and I think I came third in the shot put as well. So for a skinny kid, it was a pretty good effort.
That's a fair effort.
And so I achieved a lot, man.
Like, can shot put.
Yeah, shot put, discus, Ray. You wouldn't believe it, because I had an incredible athletic career too, and that included multi events, which was like the mini decathlons, where I was pretty much unbeatable. And I won so many years in a row. And I had a lot of state high jump records, and then the hurdles sort of came a bit more later on in my career. After my brother became state hurdles champ, I started to, as part of the decathlon multi event, you had to do the hurdles as well. And as I started to train, I started to get a little bit more competitive against my brother Paul. And then next thing I realised, I'm a state hurdles champ, to eventually be, winning the nationals and becoming an Australian champion with an Australian record. So, I did quite a lot in my junior career. So in terms of sport, I was very, very blessed.
At what point did you realise that AFL was going to be a full-time career for you?
I guess when I went in, because the footy club called me up and said, we want to offer you a contract. And that was the day I went in. I mean, the contract was $7,800. It wasn't a lot of money. And Mum was trying to convince Ian Collins to pay me more money. But anyway, it didn't eventuate. So it wasn't.
What year was that, Kuda?
That was at the end of 1990. So
wow.
I just won the Nationals hurdles, title. I lost my high jump title to Tim Forsyth, who went along, probably the greatest Australian high jumper ever, winning a bronze medal at the Olympics, winning the gold Commonwealth Games, and he was second junior best high jumper in the world. So when he jumped 216, I jumped 208. So I was never going to be a high jumper, but definitely decathlon or hurdles. So that's when, Carlton offered me a contract, and it wasn't about the money. It was more about me as a young kid having that goal, either representing Australia at the Olympics or, becoming an AFL footballer. And so when they offered me that contract, $7,800 wasn't a lot of money.
And did you have a manager, or was it your mum?
It was mum and dad. They both came along.
How good's that?
And, Oh, no, I sat there as the interpreter. I mean, Ian Collins had no idea what they were trying to say. And someone told my mum that Gavin Wanganeen was on a massive amount of money on Essendon, because Wanganeen and Glenn Jakovich were the two superstars out of the Till Cup. Yeah, they made the All-Australian. I made the All-Australian team of centre-half back in the Till Cup, but they were more the renowned ones. So being a local boy at Carlton, so at the age of 14, I get a letter, the Carlton Football Club, to come down and try in their junior development squad. And so I was rucking at junior footy, because obviously I could out-jump everyone. And, under 15, I made the Carlton team. So you picture this, boys, it was like 120 kids maybe when we first got there. We trained once a week for 10 weeks. And then if you got picked at the end in the team, then you played off in the carnival during school holidays. And I made the team 2 years in a row. And then I played both years at fullback, being athletic, and I could just spoil the ball and whatever. So it was okay. I preferred the ruck, but they never sort of played me. And then I made the Victorian under-15 team. So I was the only Carlton player really to make Victorian team, which we played the carnival down in Tasmania. But I was mainly emergency or a bench warmer until the last two games when they put me in the ruck, and I played really good against the two better teams, WA and South Australia. And so I think memory is sort of a bit harder now, but I think I rucked against Glenn Jakovic then, who was a man mountain, and he probably wouldn't, remember it.
Did you beat Jakovic in the
I
ruck?
could out-jump him. I think that was the reason why the Carlton recruiters were so keen to get me down to Carlton, because I think I had this athletic ability that maybe they hadn't seen from any other player previous. And although I was reasonably tall, they could see that I could run and jump. Yeah, that was probably just maybe, I reckon, made me stood out a little bit. Even till Cup, I mean, that almost made it the year when, is it underage? I don't know. Anyway, the year before. So I made in the top 30, but missed out in the last 5. The age that I should have been till Cup, then I made the till Cup. But I started in the ruck, but then Dennis Pagan put me a centre half back. And so I was able to just run and jump. I literally, because I'd never really had training, I couldn't really, if the ball went on the ground, I think back then I used to just struggle. But what I could do was run and jump and mark the ball, and that's what I did.
There's so much out of that we could.
I know, I'm sorry, boys. I probably confused you all with everything.
And just out of interest, who did you follow in footy back then, by the way, as a kid?
Oh, mate, the Magpies. East Thomastown was black and white, so I don't know if that was the reason why I backed for Collingwood or whether I did. But I know in my area there was basically only 2 teams, Carlton and Collingwood. They were the 2 teams. My brother Paul backed for Carlton. I backed for Collingwood, and he had a lot of celebrations during those times. I mean, 70s and 80s. I don't know how many times I did cry barracking for Collingwood. Celebrated the premiership in 1990. That was when basically I then signed up with the Carlton Football Club, and
Changed allegiances.
that was it. Yes.
What was your favourite movie from your childhood, Cooter?
I reckon if there was any, it was it was either Rocky or Rambo. I reckon those 2 movies there.
We should have predicted that. In fact, we should have had a guess at what your favourite movie was before we got there.
I was going to say Cobra.
Oh, I know. How good were they, though, mate? You go and watch Rocky and you want to go out there and just start, boxing on with everyone. And, mate, you wanted to go and train and do all those things that Rocky did. What a movie, mate. Seriously. And Rambo, I could just sit there and watch it now as well.
Tell us, so as a kid, we've talked a lot about athletics and footy. What were your other interests, or even, as you've got older, some of the interests that you've got outside of football?
I don't know. Back then, I was really just sport. If my mates decided to, do the things that I didn't want to do, like smoking and doing all those, I just sort of said, mate, it's time, we just moved on, and
So
I hung out more.
Smoked?
Never have. Never. I don't think I ever will. I can't say I never will, but
And you're not a big drinker either? Have you always been that way?
No, in the 90s, I was a big drinker. I got to the football club never having alcohol, and then you get there. And I remember our first training camp was in Narrabeen, New South Wales, and it was a 10-day torture camp. I'd never experienced anything like it. So although I did sport, I was never really a hard trainer. I never, doing athletics, you sprint, 100, 150 metres, 200, you might do a 300 or 400 here and there. And all of a sudden, we turn up to Narrabeen. We've got about 4 or 5 people in my, other teammates in my room, sharing a room with them. And, we train twice a day. And like the early mornings were either a skill session or running session. And the evening was always skill session. And in between that, it was a swim or a stretch. So it was basically just a torture camp. And I think we had 1 day off in those 10 days. And, mate, the running was like 800s, 400s, 200s, all on timed. And, mate, my body was just ravaged from that. And so it was a very, it was a tough camp, and it certainly made me grow. And it basically made me the person I was, because there was many times in there that I didn't want to. But look, at the end of that training camp, they always did like some sort of summary of it, or they did something, and Luke O'Sullivan, who was the comedian of the football club, just put on some sort of act or whatever he did every time. And so the drinking started then, boys, and I had like 1 pot, and I was already like half drunk, and then all of a sudden you have 2 pots, 3 pots. Dominic Fody, a booger back in the day, started coming out and teaching us how to drink, and that as well. And before we knew it, the bourbon and cokes were going down nicely. And I felt like I was almost an alcoholic in the 90s, and I really did go out and enjoy myself. And that was a great part about playing footy back then, is that we could drink. We played hard, trained hard, but we let our hair down on the weekend, and just had such a fun time. Probably did things maybe we shouldn't have, but didn't harm anyone. And it was just unbelievable time to play footy. So when people always ask me, the modern day footy, and like they get looked after money wise and all that, and I think they deserve more than what they get. That's my opinion. But back then, what they didn't get was that freedom that we had the luxury to go out and enjoy ourselves, drinking and doing all the silly things that we needed to do as young kids to get that out of our system. But nowadays, I don't really drink a lot. I have one or two here and there. But I'm not a big drinker, and I can definitely go without it. But if anything, I don't mind a beer here and there. Nice cold beer on a hot day.
Which beer is that? What's your beer of choice?
Mate, I'm a draft man. I used to love Carlton Colds. I
was ready for Mythos to come out of the woodwork there.
Now, when I go and see Ange at his fish and chippery,
let's give Ange a plug. What's his fish and chip shop called?
It's North Seafood and Grill.
How good is it too?
It's right. I'll be honest, not because he's one of my best mates, but I love his food. Friday I was there, lunch and dinner. That's how much I love it. It's really nice, man. I love his food.
A great little coffee place across the road too, I think he might be attached to.
Yeah, his wife owns Degani's, right next to it. And that just absolutely pumps. So if anyone's around Northcote or anywhere, you decide to come to Melbourne, definitely worth checking out Ange's. He's always there. And as you know, boys, he's one of the most, polite people you'll ever meet.
Yeah. Look, we're going to save Ange for another podcast, Kouta. So we'll, because the Kouta Ange show was a massive part of your career, but we'll touch on that in a future podcast because it's its own podcast, really, isn't it, if we get Ange on? So. All right, let's now start talking into a bit of your AFL career. So you get drafted to Carlton. You've done the deal with Colo. Talk about how long it took to finally get your senior game and what that felt like.
Yeah, I didn't get drafted, Ray. So just before the draft started, and obviously back then in the old days, for the young kids that are listening to this, there was the areas, the zones where teams would then have to go and pick and choose the players. Yeah, and so because I signed the contract at the age of 14, that means I bypassed the draft if Carlton wanted to basically pick me up. So I basically fell in the system at the end of the Till Cup. That's when Carlton offered me a contract. Didn't get drafted. I was already in Carlton's system. So, off I went. Stephen Goff, who became the CEO of Carlton, who then went on to become the CEO of the MCG. I think he was there for 20-odd years, I reckon. I never forget him early on under 19s, meeting me. And, he gave me these pair of runners. He's like, Kouta, mate, great to have you here. And just to get a pair of runners back then was incredible. So at the end of 1990, I signed a contract. I say to Ian Collins, mate, if I can just, because I knew it wasn't a lot of money, I said, if you can just at least give me that Carlton jacket. There was this jacket, bomber jacket, that back then it was like, if you put that on, mate, you felt like Superman. And that's all I asked for anyway. I didn't get that. So I said it, Justin Madden, who was number 44, I was number 43. I told him once, I said, mate, the only thing I spew about Justin is not the contract so much, but Colo promised me one of these, Carlton bomber jackets. And back then they were probably like $200. I mean, $7,800 contract. It would be very hard to just go and buy a jacket for $200. And the next day, Justin Madden turned up in my locker. I opened up my locker and he had a jacket there for me, Big Justin. So he was a great man. But my career did start very slow. So 1991, I'm playing quite a few pre-season senior games for the club. And Parker was like, mate, you're going to play senior footy this year. I thought, oh, mate, this is unbelievable. How good is this? But it wasn't to be. My form really faded away. And, I didn't get a game in 1991. So at the end of that season, I was like, oh, my God, I think, mate, I've got to do something a bit more here if I want to make senior footy. And I was like, I never touched weights until I got the footy club. But that first year, I sort of bludged a bit in the gym. And then I thought maybe I need to get a bit stronger. And I hit the weights properly for the first time. I put on about 8 or 9 kilos, like in just, I don't know how many weeks it was. I turned back and all the boys were just like, mate, what's happening to you? Like, how big are you? I'm like, oh, yeah, like, this is good, getting all the positive feedback from my teammates. And so the club decided to, in 1992, play me a fullback. I started to just beat everyone at fullback, although I wasn't able to probably showcase my full, skill sets. I was able to win a best and fairest playing a fullback in the reserves. That year there, I reckon I was emergency maybe 6 or 7 times before they finally played me. And then I started on the bench and then they played me at the half-forward flank. And, I finished off with about 15 possessions, I think in about half a game of footy. And so I played 3 games and got dropped again. Then played the last 3 games of the year. The Collingwood game was round 21. And that was the first time I ever picked up the footy with one hand. at senior footy, and then there was all this talk about it after the game. Kouta, mate, God, he picked up footy one hand, went out clubbing that night, and everyone was like, mate, you picked up the footy with one hand. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't even really know I did it because I sort of played that way my entire career. My brother Paul, in grade 6, he had a letter from the primary school teacher, had Takuta, the only kid to pick up the footy with one hand. So
Wow.
we did it all the way through. My brother did it in the under-19s at Carlton at training one night, and Ross Henshaw, who was the coach, brought everyone in and said, Kouta, if I see you or anyone else pick up the football one hand again, you won't be here. So he didn't like it too much, the under-19s coach. Yeah, I know.
And now it's a thing.
So
Now
now,
it's a thing.
now the kids and everyone was like, man, how do you do it? Mate, pick up the footy one hand and shrug everyone off with the other one.
Yeah. Well, this is a bit of a bone of contention in our family is who invented the don't argue. Was it Dusty Martin or Anthony Koutoufides?
Well, listen, mate, I was before his time, so we know I invented it. Let's not go there. He just took it to another level, though, I'll be honest, because he did it so well.
Well, you probably had the license to do it, whereas back in your day when you're saying that your coaches actually told you not to do it, whereas these days you're encouraged to do it, aren't you, really? So.
And Parker was good with it. He came to me the next day and said, Could I've been waiting 30 years to see someone do what you did yesterday, and that was to pick up the ball one hand. So,
oh, wow.
Parker was good. Yeah, he was good.
What was Parker as a coach like?
Not early on. I'll be honest. I didn't really talk to him too much, and I don't think he taught me too much about the game. And I think he had a player that could play in every position, but he had sort of work out where, I could showcase my full capabilities. And I don't think he really understood. He wasn't great to me. I mean, I never forget a game, and I spoke about this on the Mike Sheen show, is the game against North Melbourne where I started on the bench. This might have been 93 maybe, or 94 maybe. I'm not 100% sure. I started on the bench and Andrew McKay came off with the blood rule, and then I went on, and literally not even a minute later, the runner comes up to me and says, Kouta, Parker wants to know if you want to play today. And I it's easy for me to say it now, but like at the time, I felt like if I could dig a hole and bury myself, I'd wanted to do it. Like internally, I reckon I was crying, but obviously you're not going to show that in front of everyone. Get the runner comes out and you're there bawling your eyes out. Yeah, and then about a minute later, I was on the bench again, and I didn't play for the rest of that game. Yeah, so I went off, and I'm like, I wasn't sure what I needed to do to prove to him that I could play. I mean, there was one reserve game, boys, where I think I was in defence, and I had maybe 14 possessions in the first half, but then they put me in the middle, and I had 28 possessions in the second half, so I finished the game with 42 possessions in the reserves. But the next week, I still wasn't playing senior footy, so you can imagine how hard it was for me to try to keep up thinking, look how good I'm playing. There's some players in that senior team that aren't as good as what I am, but, I'm just not getting the go. And so I never really understood what Parko really wanted from me. And so it was really hard. It was tough. And I always look back and think, mate, those first 3.5 years, they weren't wasted because they made me the person that I was. But what if I did get a coach that said, mate, this kid can play, teach him, tell him what to do at training, do a little bit extra work with him,
a bit of direction,
and then off he goes, like they would do now for any junior footballer that came in particular, if someone who had talent. I mean, I'm the first guy to walk in and say, mate, I could play anywhere. And I played in the ruck too, every position on that ground, I could play, but where can you best utilise him for the sake of the team and his own talent? And so that took a little while. So Parker and I didn't see eye to eye for a long time. I love him now, and, it's all changed, but I look back and think there's a lot of kids that maybe walk into the system that if a coach doesn't see something in them, they could be out playing local footy, but really they're probably capable of playing senior footy. And that's how I see it now, because I think I could have easily have been out of that system. In 1994, I got dropped halfway through the year, and I seriously thought it was the end of my career. And then they said, mate, do you want to go and see a sports psychologist? And I said, I'll do anything. All I want to do is play senior footy. So I went to see a guy, Anthony Stewart. He taught me these words, I can, I will, you just watch me. He said, Kouta, you've got to buy yourself a diary. You have to write those words on top of your diary every single day and highlight them. And then you're going to write down everything you're going to accomplish throughout the day, even phone calls, and you're going to tick them off every single day. And that had a major impact, changed my life. Those words and Anthony Stewart. And 2 weeks later, I got picked on the wing and never looked back from that moment. So It took me 3.5 years. Yeah. He got employed by the club, Ray, the next year, 1995, and we went on to win that premiership. And so he may have been a big part of it. He sat down with Parker and said, you've got a lot of great leaders at this football club. Why don't you hand over some of the leadership to them? And that's what Parko did. If there was something good about Parko, he would understand when the time was right to just sort of allow someone else come in, because basically in 1998 he handed over to Wayne Britton, who then started taking training and started formulating our game plan, because we won our first game in 1998 and lost the next 9. Then we almost made finals footy with Bridge taking over and changing the training and all that, mate. He got us so fit. And then, of course, we got to the grand final in 99. Probably should have been in year 2000. And almost really in 2001 we were capable of getting there as well. But just injuries got in the way.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So year 2000 against Essendon, you had a massive crowd. I think 79,000 or something were there that day.
I think it was over 90 that day, 90,000, Ray.
Wow.
And then Essendon was sitting on top of the ladder. They hadn't lost the game. This is round 20. We had won 13 games in a row, so we didn't start the season well. But they started playing me more like centre half back and then into the midfield, and we just started to rock and roll. And then we just lost to the Bulldogs by about probably 3 points or something. It could have gone either way, and we just lost. Then we had Essendon round 20, so it was this big, thing in the newspaper and that too. It was a big build-up to this huge game, 90,000 people. And I don't know how many best on grounds in a row, and we came up against someone. Yeah, and unfortunately, in the first quarter, Jason Johnson came up, and as I was going for a mark, he just smashed into me with his knee, and then I tore my posterior. I didn't realise at the time, but all of a sudden I landed. My knee was like, oh my God, there's all this pain, and I knew there was something wrong. And so then I went off and I didn't play, and I missed the final series. So we're sitting comfortably second on the ladder.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Kuda. You were probably favourite for the Brownlow at that stage too, yeah?
Yeah, I was, and people always say I would have won the Brownlow if I didn't get injured. Well, if I couldn't accumulate the votes to win a Brownlow with the games that I put together, Ray, I was never going to win.
Yeah.
And I don't even think I was in front of the Brownlow even at that round 20. So I knew on that night I was in trouble. And Shane Woden won it. I don't know how many BOGs in a row I got. Like, no one's seen a stretch of footy, as they say, like what I put together. I'd be thinking that game in the prelim final, I had over 200 and something points for just that one quarter. But to get 200 in a game was phenomenal. But I would love to have gone back to year 2000 to see what sort of numbers I would have brought up then. But yeah, that was a tough one. So then Essendon, obviously go on and beat us that day and then go on to win the grand final. But after we beat them in the 99 prelim final, they played Melbourne in the grand final, right? But we beat Melbourne by 99 points throughout that year. And so we were far superior team. But I got injured that day. Braddles got injured. I tried to come back for the final. It should have been a 3 or 4 week injury. I almost put up my hand for the final. I think it might have been against Melbourne. I'm not 100% sure. I was like doing the training outside number 1 oval. And I was like, mate, I think I can get through this game. And Brits goes, all right, let's have one more kick. And as I went up to jump and mark this ball, something grabbed in my knee. And I went down with the most excruciating pain. And my knee blew up like I'd never seen before. And that was it. That injury there took me 9 months to recover. And that was the year 2000 when the Sydney Olympics was on. So we finished the season a little bit early. And the next year we started a little bit later. So it timed it really well for me to just be right for round 1 of 2001 after a 3 to 4 week injury. Took me 9 months where I just had much swelling in that knee that would never go down.
And how did you cope with that mentally, Kuda? Because it would have been a fair toll on you going through that after you were on such a high, to be honest.
I was just disappointed because I love playing finals footy. I always prided myself on finals. And if we look back, a lot of the finals games, if I wasn't best player, I'd be right up there for the majority of the time. And that was like no different to junior footy. Like, it was always final stuff, and even athletics. I always perform my PBs, personal best, on the big occasions, on the nationals or whatever it was. And so that's the sort of performer that I was. I love the big game, the big stage or whatever. And I don't know whatever it was. And so it was hard to watch because I just love playing finals footy. So see Essendon and Melbourne. Essendon deserved it that year, but in the back of my head, I'm like, who knows if we could have beaten them. In particular, final. We were so hard and tough in year 2000 because Bridge sort of produced these players and just taught them, and just they became animals. Aidan Hickmon, Darren Hume, your Franchinas, Aaron Hamill, and all these guys that basically Bridge took. These guys that were probably average players and became so important to our team and great players of this football club. They meant, a lot to us. They were sort of the heart and soul of our club, these sort of players, and, so we never know, what could have happened that year there. And then 2001 was sort of similar. We weren't quite as consistent as what we were 2000, but, mate, we could play. And unfortunately, The first week of the finals, we get Adelaide, and we should have finished top 4 that year. So it was our own fault. I missed the game, and the boys just lost to Hawthorn after the siren, and a little bit of my fault too. But I had that osteopubis or whatever it's called, that
Oh,
groin injury, and
yep.
it was just giving me a little bit of pain, like too much pain. I needed just a week off just to help it along, and then somehow Richmond beat Essendon in the last round, which we don't know. I find it hard to believe. Anyway, they beat them, and Richmond finished fourth. That's your mob,
Yeah.
cheats.
Yeah. Both of us are Richmond
Both
supporters.
the
Yeah,
boys are,
yeah,
and we
yeah.
finished fifth that year. And so then you guys go and play Essendon thump you in the first week of the finals. But we got Adelaide, and we thumped Adelaide. And if you listen to the commentary of that game, it's like, mate, no one's safe with Carlton in this form, Cooter in this form. It was all of that, because I finished that game with 36 possessions, but like basically 34 of them were all out of that sort of centre area. So none really, only 2, I think there was either up forward or up back. So basically in that middle area, I just dominated that game. Jimmy Plunkett had a standout too. He had 36 and kicked 2 goals, and we were on 5. But then the next week against your mob, Richmond, halftime you guys were a little bit in front. You played a very frustrating game that day. And then in the third quarter, we were starting to get going. And then I went to kick the ball off the ground, and my foot got stuck, and Matty Knights came across and hit Adrian Hickman, sort of pushed him into it. My foot got stuck in the pack and just snapped my anterior. And that was the most painful injury I'd ever
Yeah, I was
had for the
actually at that
first.
game. The whole
Yeah,
ground went silent that day. I think we all knew exactly what was going on. It was terrible to watch.
yeah. There was some Richmond supporters I don't think too disappointed though, Ray boy. And
A legend of the game, you have a respect for them, and I think that was one of the things, and we've talked about it a little bit. Is you were probably one of the first ones where people turned up to games to watch Cooter, not just for Carlton or Richmond. You probably you're bigger than just a club. You were a legend of the game at that stage, and amazing to watch as a footballer. So, and there's been players since then like Buddy Franklin and obviously Dusty Martin, but you were one of the first to really be that next level.
I was pretty lucky, Ray, because when you think of my career in the first 3.5 years, how I struggled, and halfway through 1994, if anyone would have said to me, "Look, Cooter, you're going to go on and win a couple of best and first, make the All Australian, but look, at the end of your career, you're going to make the AFL Hall of Fame," everyone would have thought, "You're crazy, man. There's no way this could have happened." Then all of a sudden, bang. And, 1996, I go and take 18 marks against West Coast Eagles. I take a mark in defence in the dying, with 10 or 12 seconds to go. If I didn't mark that, Jason Ball probably would have marked it for the Eagles. It would have been a draw, or they would have won the game. And the entire crowd was chanting "Cooter, Cooter." And the 99 prelim final, as I took over in that last quarter, also the entire crowd was chanting "Cooter, Cooter." Even Matty Lloyd said that he'd never heard anything like it in his career. And so I had this following. Even 95, after we won the premiership, and Carlton said they'd never seen so many fan letters sent to any player before in the past. I mean, I had bags and bags full of these letters from incredible supporters. I was so blessed because I had a following of people. What's Cooter doing? He's played terrible today. That's the reason why Carlton lost. My form was a bit up and down. I lost my father in 98. My form was terrible. I had to learn from that, move on, and then have 3 most remarkable years: 99, 2000, and 2001. So, I had a lot of people follow me around, and even the recruiters were chasing the next Cooter. And Sam Mitchell wrote in his autobiography, he wasn't happy because he was the time where he was more like the Greg Williams, not quite an athlete, but mate, what a footballer he was.
Oh,
But
yeah.
because they were
Yeah.
chasing athletes, he had to, start as a rookie player. And he blames me because of that, because the recruiters were like, "Man, you're not athletic enough," and that's. So I sort of started a whole new culture of this game. I changed the game. All of a sudden, yes, we love footballers and watching footballers, but mate, if you get athletes into the game, look what they can do, And so I changed the game, and as in the AFL Hall of Fame, changing of the game was my headline there. So I never would have thought or imagined that halfway through 1994.
You just mentioned about 98. So let's touch on that briefly, if you don't mind. Losing your dad. That was fairly young to lose your father.
Yeah, I mean, here I am as a kid. Growing up, we didn't have a lot of money, but I had love and support from my parents. I loved them dearly. And I always say I never would have made it in AFL footy if it wasn't for my parents. Their support was just unbelievable, for me. And then all of a sudden, a guy from Thomastown obscurity, like of Thomas, and all of a sudden gets all this fame, and people are following him around. I'm getting roses on my car windscreen at home. Everyone knew where I lived, mate. I went to the juvenile detention centre. They've gone, Kouta, we all know where you live, and they named the exact address. And I'm like, God damn, what is going on here? We had to build a fence at the front of the house to make sure we closed the gate at night. And people stopped during the night, 2, 3 in the morning. Kouta. People would come around. It was a bit like them. It was a bit mayhem, but Australia was such a safe place. I'd hate for it to be now. You'd probably get some crazy people, but I had a lot of fun with it. And the neighbourhood was fun. The supporters were great. Like, we had a little bit of trouble, but the majority of the time it was good. And I think it was good for everyone. The neighbourhood and all, they'd come around, hang out. It was just a real fun time. All of a sudden, the last thing I expected, my parents, they're watching the grand final premiership, and they're probably the proudest parents, on the entire planet. The last thing I expected was my father not to be there. In the end of 1997, this was December, he got diagnosed with cancer. And then by March of 1998, I was out training with the boys. The club just called me up and said, mate, we've had a phone call, you better go see your father. And so, I was there for his last breath, and it was just really hard for me to take and understand, because I was still living at home. I used to drive both mum and dad to the footy games, and every time he woke up at home during the night, I couldn't sleep at that time, man. I had the door open. If he woke up, I was awake too. And, I just try to spend every second as I could, always deep down believe, no, he's going to get through this. All those deteriorating at a rate of knots. I just couldn't believe that one day he wouldn't be there. And then he was gone, and it was hard. And, going home was eerie. I didn't want to train. I didn't want to play footy. I just wanted my father back. I would have given away everything just to have him back, but he was gone. And so it was hard for me to take. I was a young kid. I thought it was unfair. Why me? Why me? Were the questions in my head going through. And so the drinking became a real issue. Then I'd go out not just once, sometimes twice a week, and 14 hours, and just drink and just let my hair down and just try to forget that my father wasn't around. But it affected my footy. And, it was one game against Freo. I think I had about 5 possessions for the game. It was the worst game I ever played. And, my mates came over then as well. We're drinking again. And the next morning, my phone was ringing. I'm like, what? It was unusual for your mobile phone to ring 1998 non-stop. And then someone, as I jumped on the plane, someone handed over the Herald Sun. And at the back, it had dropped Kouta. The club, brought me in. Wayne Britton, Barry Mish, my 2 greatest mentors, brought me in and said, Kouta, we know what's happened, your father and all that, but right now you're just not fit enough to play senior footy. You've got to make a decision what it is that you want to do. Otherwise, you'll be out of the system. And that's when I went home. I was really emotional that night. And I looked up above, and I was just pretending my father was looking down, and I was pretending I was talking to him. And I thought, I'm an idiot, because if my father's looking down, he don't want to see me just drink my life away. He'd want to, see me play the best footy that I possibly could. So that was the day I promised him. And I said, I'm going to train harder than I ever did before. And that's how 1999, 2000, 2001 evolved, is that as much as I thought I trained hard, I pushed even harder, that 2 or 3 or 4% more for my father. And then I got my fitness to another level. And once I got to there, the game was a lot easier for me then to be able to play when I was at my maximum fitness.
Something I didn't know until this morning when I was doing a bit of research on you is the great boot scandal.
Scandal, Jesus Christ. Hey, it sounds like I'm a criminal. The scandal of the footy club, not me, right?
What happened there, Kouta? Because you almost, is it true that you almost missed a game over the boot scandal?
Yeah, and guess who was against Richmond? So there you go. It was true. Gary Ablett was the face of Adidas, the footy boots. And then as, 94, 95 started coming around, all of a sudden I'm starting to get this fame. Adidas were like, mate, we want to sponsor. I'm like, mate, of course, my Adidas 3 stripes, European brand. I remember going in as a junior athlete trying to get, spikes off them, and they gave me no help. And in my back of my head, I'm like, one day you're going to regret this. And then all of a sudden there I was, sponsored by Adidas. And so at the end of in 1996, Carlton got new marketing guys into the club. And basically their thing was, as far as I know, I've got to be careful saying these sort of things. So people might go, oh, that's not true or whatever. But as far as I was told, that any new marketing deal they got a certain percentage out of it. So there was no easier thing to do than go to a sporting brand and say, Nike, if you want, we can come to you. Although we've been with us for 20 years, and Nike's gone, bloody oath, Carlton's the most powerful club in the competition. Of course, I want to, come across. And so they got Nike over, promising that they would get every player also. But I was contracted with Adidas. And then when I found out, I'm like, but why? Like, why can't I stay with Adidas? I've been with them. I want to stay loyal to them because they showed faith in me. And I don't want to just change over to Nike. And so the fight was on. The club weren't happy at all because back then it was like they dictated everything.
Yeah.
But it was my time to really stand up to the bully at this stage because, they dictated contracts and, held me back and did whatever they wanted to do. And now it's like, well, now it's my turn, man. I'm going to stick with this. I had a manager that was just so strong, David Allison. He said, mate, we'll stay with Adidas. Don't worry about it. And if it means that you don't play, you don't play. And I said, all right, then I won. And so the club were prepared for me not to play. But then I think it was that we were playing Richmond on the Friday night. Then I got the phone call basically Friday morning, and that was from Parko. Said, mate, it's all good, Cooter, you can play tonight. I said, thank you so much, Parko. That's made my day. And I, as much as I went out there with pressure and, everyone just watching and just to see how I'll go, I got through and we got a victory too that night too. So it all worked out well. But, the club obviously weren't too happy. And it was a little bit different to run out the next year, the only footballer running out like in my team with Adidas boots while everyone else was wearing Nike. So it was a little bit strange and funny at first, but what that did was open up the doors for every other AFL player to go and negotiate any sort of footwear deal that they wanted to with any other sporting brands. And so many sporting brands came in and started sponsoring all these players. So it was just, it just opened up the doors for so many other things. Adidas sent me to the head office in Germany. I went with my brother Paul, my mum. I dropped off mum in Italy, and my brother and Paul, myself, my cousin Walter from Italy. We went to Germany and spent 3 days at the head office in Germany. So I met all the big boys there. I had the Cooter boot done with 43 on there. They measured my feet. They did all that stuff. Sent me boots. I never wore them because it was hard enough just to wear Adidas boots, let alone go out there wearing Cooter, number 43 on your boots and stuff like that. So I didn't wear them. But I got to see all the technology. This was like a dream come true. As a young kid, the sporting brands, Adidas, Nike and all that was just, I loved it. And so to be able to go there, I was just like a little kid, man, in the candy store, as they say, just going around, checking out the museum and all that. And then they allowed me to do a bit of shopping there as well. It was just unbelievable, boys. If I could go back and just have 3 more days at the Adidas head office again, that'd be probably my next dream
Awesome.
again. There or even not, whatever.
It's up there,
some
isn't it?
sporting brand. I love it.
So, and while we're on that, so obviously shoes is a bit of a love of yours. Did that come from around that time? And, it's crazy because shoes have gone crazy for lots of kids now. They're the big collectible. But you were probably a bit before your time with your shoe collection. You've got an amazing shoe collection.
Yeah, but as a young kid, I always loved sneakers. We'd go to the sports store. We could never afford them. I remember, I think it was my auntie and uncle that came from South Africa. My dad's brother and my dad's sister and her husband came from South Africa, had a little bit more money than us and bought my brother and I our first Adidas runners, which I treasured. So I've always been a sneaker man. I remember the Adidas web. We'd go then read about the technology and, all the other stuff, the Nike, and we used to draw our own runners. So we always loved runners, being at, doing athletics too with spikes. It was just a big thing. And any nationals, there'd always be stores there with the Asics and the Nike and the Adidas and the Puma. I just loved it. My love when I was a young kid was to walk in any sports store just to have a look around. And although we never really could afford too many of the good pairs, my first love became the ZX 8000 torsions of the late 80s when they had this range of Adidas. Yeah, they had the blue, the white. It was just other colors. I still got the revised versions now because that was my all-time favorite sneaker. And so from then, I started collecting more sneakers, and of course, I got a few for free from Adidas, and then it evolved into Jordans, who I think is the greatest athlete of all time, to Kobe's, to LeBron's, and all the other sporting brands. I've got a lot of Adidas and all that sort of stuff. I've got too many sneakers, but that's sort of one of the loves that I do have, and I enjoy doing.
So, Kuda, you've had some amazing achievements throughout your career, including, I think, Team of the Century for Greece and for Italy. Is that correct?
The Greek and Italian, Team of the Century, correct. Yes, both, yes.
But what would you say was your greatest highlight?
The 95 premiership by far, Ray. And like I always say, that was the greatest day of my life. And when you think of the heartache and pain I went through for 3.5 years, I timed it so well to start to find really good form in 94 and have the most remarkable year, 95, where we only lost 2 games the entire year. It was an AFL record back then. I played with some of the most elite Carlton footballers of all time, some of them AFL legends, as we'll know. And to go on and beat Geelong by 60-odd points that game in the grand final. We're up by 80-odd points halfway through the last quarter. We could have easily won by 100, but look, Geelong kicked a few at the end, but what a team we had. And that day there, when the siren went, I remember halfway through last quarter, I'm standing in the middle of MCG looking around thinking, wow, I'm about to be a premiership player here.
Yeah.
And that last Saturday of September was always the greatest day on the calendar for me as a young kid, watching every grand final, pretending I was playing for them, and there I was. And so that day there can never surpass the emotions and the feelings. And I always say, although, I've had got married, had the 3 kids, and you never replace a premiership with your kids, as you know. I mean, that's stupidity to even think of that. But if we're talking about sheer emotions and that dream and love as a young kid, that it all come together for this, this grand final, this premiership win, I can never surpass that feeling when you're celebrating with not just myself, but with your family and all the supporters and all the, people of the club. That is the most amazing feeling.
Okay, so speaking of fair achievements, you've been on some TV shows, Cooter. Let's talk about your TV career, because the probably the most known one is Dancing with the Stars. And then you've got Gladiators, is that correct?
Correct.
Is there any other TV shows that you've appeared on, Cooter?
Yeah, Celebrity Come Dine with Me. I did that.
Oh, really? What was that?
When was
I
that?
had to cook. I had to actually cook. So I never really cooked in my life, and so they found that pretty funny. But I should have really won that, but I came second. That's okay, I'll take that. Had Mum come in and help me out with the gnocchi. That was a bit of a setup job, but anyway, yes. So I've done that. But and if we talk about theatre, I did a.
You've been in the theatre.
Well, yeah. Well, it was called 42nd Street, boys. I was a thug on there, so Richard Pratt asked me if I would do it. Retired from footy, and Jeannie Pratt asked me also, and it was going to take a little bit of training, and I had to, work on my American accent as I walked out there as the thug. And it wasn't like a long sort of thing that I had to do. There was a couple of scenes, but it was fun, and I really did enjoy that. So that were 2. I think I did 2 or 3. Was there more? 4? I don't know. There might have been a few sell-out shows of 42nd Street. It was they did it incredibly well. I must say, I even enjoyed watching it. I wish I had a recording of it to just go back and watch, but the dancing and everything was just phenomenal.
You asked this question, Nico. Let's start again. Nico's going to ask this one.
What show were you offered but you passed up on?
That I regret?
Yeah.
Probably Celebrity Get Me Out of Here, that I think became one of my sort of shows that I used to enjoy watching. That was probably the one that maybe I regret, maybe not. Except not to say that I would have got it, but maybe, I did get asked to go on there, but said no. So that's probably one. I mean, the Dancing with the Stars was just unbelievable. I mean, I was on the morning of the show, and Channel 7 had the odds for Dancing with the Stars, and I was the least favourite to win. So I thought I was going to be the first one out, and then I found myself in the grand final and winning it, at the end, and dancing with the likes of Andrew Gaze and Chris Hemsworth, as we all know. Chris, the megastar.
Yeah.
Tamsin Lewis and Kerry Armstrong, who's doing well. Gary Sweet, who was really well renowned back in the day. And so other great celebs that I met during then. Then, of course, the Gladiators was a little bit of fun, living away from home for a little while with these crazy athletes that looked good. And, that was really tough also, but a lot of fun. So the good thing about, although they're reality shows, is that they're great life experiences too. And I know some people go, oh, yeah, this, and they're not really celebs and they always bag it. But for me, like, you get a lot of great memories out of it. And, I just completed last year, we filmed it the year before, in the end of 2021, was Dancing with the Stars All-Stars. So 4 previous winners, 6 previous participants, and 4 newbies in one series as well. And, mate, that was unbelievable as well. It was tough and intense. That was the most intense of any show that I'd been on. Everyone was just so keen on winning that one, and it was good fun too. So they're all good. It's good to just get out there and experience different things.
Just to touch back on Richard Pratt. So you've had, I guess one of the things about your career, some of the people that you've met along the way, there's some amazing names, but another one that comes to mind was John Elliott.
I love Jack. I mean, I was in awe of him, I guess, when I walked into that football club. He had that power. He was leading the most, incredible football. I think the best football club, and created an incredible culture. I never really understood Carlton Football Club. See, barracking for Collingwood, and Carlton would always win, even if they were behind. It was something to do about culture. And so once I got in there, I understood it was led by Jack. And Jack said that the club, it was like a family environment. And it's not easy to maintain a great culture after probably, 2 decades of great culture. Jack takes over and continues it on. But I understood why, because when he left, it was the complete opposite. It wasn't a family environment anymore. And so I loved Jack. I always loved him anyway. I mean, he was charismatic. He was funny. He'd tell the story, but I felt like he was a father figure to me too. Like, I just got along with him so well. I would laugh with him in his stories, and I found him funny. And of course, he wasn't the most perfect man, as we know, and none of us are. But he was probably a little bit too, he had that no care factor.
Yeah.
But I never forget the first time, before a game, and he came up to me and tapped me on the back and said, "Your day today, Cooter." And mate, that was just, you talk about goosebumps, Ray. That's what I had. I'm like, my God, he actually knows my name.
Oh,
And
wow,
I'm like,
yeah.
mate, he said, yeah. And I'm like, mate, I was so pumped up. I was like, if he told me to run through that brick wall, I would have done it for him. And that's what I loved about that football club, is that although we were the players, we felt the support and love of, the president and all the committee, like everyone was part of the board members were just part of the footy club. We just hug each other and, like love each other's presence. And we knew we'd go out there and we'd wear the jumper with pride and make the club proud, because that's what we were. And so when I got to the club, it was like, man, if you want to be remembered at this footy club, you've got to win premierships, because there was, guys in there that had a premiership player, 2 premierships, 3. Wayne Johnson, who I think was just sort of retired, he had 4. Like, there was premiership players everywhere at that footy club. And so if you wanted to win, you had be remembered, you had to win premierships. And so there was a standard that we all had to abide by. And that's how the club that I walked into and had to learn amongst. And it was Sticks was the greatest leader, but he had 14 or 15 other lieutenants around him that just did equally as good a role, to be able to push us younger guys to get ourselves better. So then we can, play at our peak. And that's what the footy club was all about. And Jack was unbelievable to supporters and everything. And I don't think people realise, because the media can go out there and portray people in any way that they want. And if you're good friends with the media, they can make people look bad as well. But Jack was so kind and generous. He never, argued with anything that was said. But to take his name down off the grandstand, I thought was pathetic, man, if I can really use that word. I mean, it was terrible. Like, that was the heart and soul of the footy club, and you want to take it down for no real reason. What did he do wrong? What?
Yeah.
The salary cap was a little bit over. What? Because you said it was? Because you only wanted to pay out 90%, not 100% of it? You don't know the way that maybe he worked it, that maybe it might have been all okay later on. We don't know, but, if you want to go out and say that. And so they made him look bad, but he was just a loving man who probably wanted to play, AFL footy for Carlton, wasn't able to, and probably felt like he was part of the team and, part of the club, part of the boys by being president of that football club. And he protected us with everything. And those events, those functions that we had, he always made them fun and interesting, and we'd laugh, and the way that he'd talk and, bag the other clubs, and some things we didn't really appreciate it. But you know what? That made the Carlton Football Club. That made us, like, we were arrogant, but we were powerful.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, he was still respectful to everyone, man. When I say that, respectful to the players, and he was yes, he had, some things where he wasn't great at, but he was just a great man, led the club so well.
All right, Cooter, let's talk about the Cooter of now. So tell us about what you're up to now and what life's like. Day in the life of Cooter now.
I try to help people get healthier and happier. And 13 years ago, Ray, I was really struggling with my health. I'd sleep 11 hours a night, struggled to get out of bed, had all these health issues. I stopped training for a little while, had a bit of a stomach for the first time. I was eating organic food, going to see doctors, allergy specialists, blood specialists, and mate, nothing was working. I was really concerned with my health for the first time, waiting for some bad news to come in, thinking there's got to be something wrong here, because maybe I took time off training because I thought maybe my body's been overworked from footy, which was wrong. And so I wasn't sure what was wrong. I got introduced to products called Herbalife, and I was a real skeptic, jumped on them. And 6 days later, being on the products consistently for those 6 days, it changed my life. And so I've been on those products for 12 years as of next month, and never missed one single day. I love them. And they're not for everyone, I don't care. But I've helped hundreds and hundreds of people. My coaches have helped thousands of people throughout our time. And so, I do that with the philosophy of the Koutoufides: 20% is exercise, 80% nutrition, 100% mindset. Nutrition's a big key nowadays. And people say, but what should I eat, Cooter? You know what, mate? By doing what I do, it takes the guesswork out of everything. I know the body's getting all the nutrition it needs daily, consistently, and then I can go and enjoy the foods that I do. And so people see me and go, do you actually eat that? And I'm like, what do you mean, do I eat that? Like, I eat that all the time. Like, if I go to Angie's Fish and Chip Place, I have a burger, potato cakes, dim sims, chips. Like, I enjoy food. Like, Italian mother, father was Greek, man. I grew up with food. It was manja. That means eat, and so that's how I am. But during the day, I'm really strict on my Herbalife stuff, and that's how I do it. And I train, and I love it. And I've got a bad shoulder, I've got a bad hip, so I can't train it the way that I want to. I just do what I can, and I get through that way as well. And so I try to inspire people to be able to just get out there, find a little bit of time for themselves. When I lost my father, Ray, that was the point in time when I knew I had to prioritize my health as number one. Because when he was unwell and I was going to a preseason game, every time I'll go to a game, he'd always say, good luck. And this time here, I said, I'm going, Dad. And he just said, like, okay. And then I stood there, I said, aren't you going to wish me luck? And like, he just wasn't interested because he was just about to pass away. And so then I realized how important. So sometimes we have to be a little bit selfish and go, we have to look after ourselves, number one priority, being healthy, because if we're not, we'll get cranky and then we reflect that on everyone else if it doesn't start with us. So it starts with us. It gives us a better chance of then, being that nicer person because you're feeling good. And although the kids are going to irritate you, or maybe your wife or whatever, that's part of life, but still it gives you a great base for setting up your day. And so I always talk about, dynamic health. It's not just, there's ways of doing it out there. And as I believe food is getting worse and will get worse in the way that everything is being done now, that I think it's really more important to have some sort of supplementation that is quality, that the body's going to absorb, that's going to make you feel good. And that's what I do now and try to inspire others doing that as well.
Do you actually miss playing footy?
I think I'll always miss footy, and as much as I try to be brave and say, mate, it's past life, footy was very special for me. I always loved sport as a young kid, and that was basically my life. I ended up at the most incredible footy club. It made me the person I am. I still get, looked after nowadays. Like when I think the Bride and Lexus looked after me with a car for the last 4 years and a bit, I'm thinking, who am I? But how lucky I am that I played footy and did what I did, and still get the benefits now of it as well. And so I'll always miss footy. I mean, how do you beat that feeling of, your teammates going to war, walking off after a great win and things like that? We never miss the training and the meetings, but that game of footy, I guess I'll always miss. And now I just sit there as a bystander, as a supporter, watching the Blues play and hope soon that they can win a premiership as well. So then, me and Lucas and my family then will be able to celebrate with all the Carlton supporters. And we're waiting for that time.
Well, it's bound to come soon enough, isn't it? I think they're on the up for this year.
I think so, yeah. I mean, last year they should have really made finals, but whatever happened, they just fell by that one.
Fell away, didn't they?
In and out, yeah. So, but I think they've got the basis there as a team and the list there to be able to really scare a lot of teams. And who knows what, by scaring a lot of teams, you just never know come finals where you end up with a little bit of good form at the right time and stuff like that. So
round one against Richmond will be a big teller.
I will smash you, boys. Don't worry about that.
Hey, you just mentioned Lucas, but can we just touch on the kids? You've got three beautiful kids. So Susie and you obviously are very proud of those three. Who's more likely to play AFL? And also Monique, budding modellist as well.
Well, Monique won't be AFL, I know that. Jamie has been basketball his whole life. He's a great basketballer. Unfortunately, there's people that can get in the way. Yeah, he really is. But, people don't see something in you, don't get that opportunity. It's a bit like me. I could have easily been out of the AFL system. Instead, luckily, 3.5 years later, they see something, play me in a position where I could thrive, and off I went. I feel like Jamie's a little bit like that. He's got like all this talent, but now he's got his eye on footy. I don't know how this is going to pan out, but he's the sort of kid that when he wants to do something, he just goes out there and gives his very best. So he's a good boy, Jamie. He's very athletic, and the kid can run. I mean, he's never really played footy properly, so I don't know where that stands with him. So let's see how he goes. But definitely Lucas, he started really well. He's won a competition best and fairest. He came second by one vote last year. He almost made the Victorian footy team. He just missed that last batch of 8 or 9 or 10 that got eliminated, but he made the Victorian basketball team. So he's pretty good. He's always been on the chubby side, and all of a sudden, the last 2 or 3 months, he's really started to trim down and grow even taller now. So I'm very proud of him. He loves Carlton. So I always say this, boys, that, I had Jamie and he was like not interested in footy. Monique, not interested in footy. Susie wasn't. So I was like, man, I've got to have another kiddie. I'm like, please give me a boy. And when I found out he was going to be a boy, I was just like, mate, this kid's going to sleep with the footy because this one is going to definitely play. I needed one footballer in the family. And so luckily I've got Lucas, mate, that loves the footy, and hopefully one day no pressure on him. Whatever happens, happens.
Hey, okay, Kouta. So you know what the podcast's called? It's called "I Should Have Stayed in Bed." Tell us your greatest "I should have stayed in bed" moment in your life.
I don't want to really have to bring this up, but probably
Go
I did
on,
a commercial.
you know you
Let's
want to.
go there.
I did a commercial that has really spanned across the world and got a lot of views. Probably not for the right reason, though, boys. You know, I think probably because it was that bad. And I guess you two will probably know.
We
What that
don't
is.
have
Do
a
I need
clue.
to say
No,
it?
not a clue.
Oh, God.
Well, it's fascinating,
Anyway,
isn't
I
it?
threw a banana to a monkey, which turned out to be a gorilla. So I didn't know because I was just told what to say. Somehow the monkey turned out to be a gorilla when the commercial was made. Anyway, it wasn't actually, it was a Slovakia ad. It was actually never aired on television, but just YouTube must have started around that time. And it just, I don't know, somehow it just got energy and people just started to watch it, and all of a sudden it's got 1.7 million views, basically. That's what
Compared
it's
to
got.
so your other YouTube highlights would be in the hundreds of thousands. Am I correct?
Not even, mate. Probably
Yeah.
about 300 or 500 views all these years of playing AFL footy, and then one terrible commercial gets 1.7 million views. It actually went to Greece, boys. You wouldn't believe this, to the most popular show. My mate recorded it. So the most popular show in Greece had played this commercial, and they literally couldn't talk. They were in tears laughing, saying that's how bad it was. And for a minute or two, there was nothing said but just laughter. And then channel ABC did some sort of brown logie, so it must have been all the worst things. And I think I won the brown logie, and they called me up and asked me if I wanted to go and accept the award. And I said, look, I think I'll pass on that one. So, yes, that was probably one moment right there, boys.
Well, thanks, Kouta. You are an inspiration to us all, but also a very humble person and absolute champion bloke. Thanks again for giving us goosebumps and being so open with us today. I think we look forward to round 2 of the Kouta Ange podcast. We'll definitely have to schedule that in as well. But thanks again for being so generous with your time, as you always are, and for being so candid with us today.
No worries. Thanks, boys.
Bloody good.
All right, boys.
Thanks, mate.
Catch ya.
See ya. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Where is the rat this week?
Hello?
Shawnee.
Shawnee.
Yeah.
What's the rat doing today?
Where are you?
Where am I? I'm at the fucking Summoners, man. I can't hear shit. This fucking car's doing burnouts flat out. It's just going fucking mad. It's just crazy. Absolutely crazy, man.
Have you had a beer yet?
I've had about 10 already.
So this is being recorded at 11 o'clock in the morning, by the way. So that's a fair effort.
Fucking give it up! Give it up! Woo! Woo-hoo! Holy shit! The joint's on fire, man. It's just fucking out of control.
How's Cars and Things Restos?
Cars and Things Restos did really good. They got top 60.
Yep.
Give it up! Fucking give it up! The boys done really, really well, and the guys they got a lot of fans. They're coming up to them and supporting them, so they've done really, really good. Give it up! Woo!
So what other travel plans you got lined up?
I'm thinking of going to Broome. I'm supposed to be going to my cousin's wedding up there. Give it up! Woo!
Trav's still in bed, is he?
No. We're all here. Every day we're on the clock. We are. Everybody, we've got to do what Crouchy tells us to do. We spit and polish the car and get it ready for the next show and shine or something.
And you're still in control of the camera.
Yeah. I'm the cameraman for the whole show, sort of thing.
And the weather's good.
Yeah, it is now. The first few days is a little bit cold. Typical Canberra, I think. But she's putting on a show today. Shorts, thongs, shirt, getting a bit burnt.
How many people there?
It's all good. Thousands of people here. And today there's still thousands here, but not as many. It was that bad yesterday afternoon. It just they had to shut it down. They were kicking people off the main loop, left, right, and centre, ripping stickers off so they couldn't get back in.
Oh, fair dinkum.
Because it was out of control. It just went off tap. It was like a riot, absolute riot.
Tell me what it feels like when you're standing in the crowd and someone walks up and wants Crouchy's autograph.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Well, hey, Paul, I just had, just before you rang me, I had a guy pull me up because I'm wearing one of their shirts. Paul, where's Paul? I said, he's over the back there having a pull. Give it up! Fucking give it up! I tell you what, if you could just see what I'm seeing, it's unbelievable. It's just tire smoke going flat out. Pretty hard to hear.
We can just hear it in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can hear it now.
Yeah, that's decent. What's that? What car's that?
I don't think you can hear us.
I can hear now. He stopped. Mick got busted the other day. We didn't cover up the beers. Security guys confiscated half a slab off us, but I know I had the box of Jack sitting under my feet saying, yep, you look in the back there, don't look under my fucking feet.
That's the thing about you. You're a thinker, one step ahead.
That's it. You got to be one step ahead of the rest of the pack.
All right, mate.
Okay.
We'll let you go. We'll speak to you next week.
I'm in Hoon fucking heaven, man.
Good on you, mate. See you, Shawnee.
All right. See you, boys.
All right, Nico, for one of our favourite segments of the week, we are up to, have you got the drum roll?
Shit beer of the week.
Shit beer of the week. And we went right to the top today to find one of our friends of the show. His name's Michael Saru, a very close friend of both of ours. And we've picked a different beer this week. We've got a raspberry stout. Now, Michael's voice is a bit croaky this morning, so I feel like this could be like medicine on his throat.
It could be good.
It could be good. It's the Suburban Brew Raspberry Stout. Michael, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Thanks, Raymond. Thanks, Nico.
All right, we've just cracked open our first raspberry stout. I can't believe that's actually a thing.
That's pretty good, actually.
It's not too bad. Michael?
It's like a cherry ripe.
Well, why would you? This isn't a beer. We should go to a lolly shop.
It tastes like medicine, doesn't it?
Yeah, if you think medicine should taste like that.
It's not too bad.
Yeah, but what is it, Ray?
It's a stout.
But it's not a stout.
It's a raspberry stout.
It may be fantastic at a lolly shop.
It's a dark chocolate brownie with raspberry sauce and ice cream.
I feel like it's made for Mick too, because it says "Love thy neighbour." It's giving you a few tips on the top about being nice to people. It's got ice cream on top. It's not as bad as the chicken salt. We had chicken salt beer last week, and it was actually terrible.
Well, I don't mind it.
Would you drink it again?
I haven't got time.
Beer of the week is not shit.
Well,
That's pretty good.
We're giving it a
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Thanks for joining us this week, Mick. It's good to finally have you on the podcast. I'm
It's a
sure
pleasure being
after
here.
that performance, you'll never be on again.